Welcome back to Concrete Play. Today we're going to talk about techniques. Now by this I just mean any power that the avatar uses that's not a basic attack. So, you're playing yourself in an RPG. You're like, okay, I'm going to go fight a monster. Let's go. And then you fight the monster by hitting, fight, attack. But maybe the monster's a little bit too tough, and you don't like the fact that it's going to chip away all that health, or maybe it might poison you or something, and you really don't want to deal with that. So you're like, okay, I am going to go ahead and use a technique. I'm going to use something that makes this fight easier. Great. That is a great way to let the players decide how much of their resources they want to throw at any given fight. And it also allows the player to decide what kinds of fights they're willing to take on. But these techniques have to be limited. If the techniques are unlimited, then they're just a better version of your basic attack. If you can always use your grenade, then there's no reason to ever use your pistol. If you can always use your fireball, there's never any reason to hit someone with your stick. So I'm going to teach you the 4 basic mechanisms to limit techniques. And I'm only going to graze over them. All 4 of them could be videos on their own. And I'm sure you will have thought of all 4 of these before, but probably not framed like this. So I'm hoping that you'll find it's interesting. The first technique is probably the most obvious, and that is you just have a mana bar. So if your wizard throws a fireball, then you chip off some of that wizard's mana. Okay, I can cast this fireball 5 times before I run it out. Sounds good. You now have a specific limit. Your technique can be used 5 times. But you have to understand the constraints of the mana bar system. Having mana does not prevent you from spamming these techniques. It just prevents you from eternally spamming these techniques. So, yeah, okay, it takes 1/5 of my mana bar. Well, in that case, I can fight anything I want by just throwing five fireballs at it real quick. And all I do is I shoot fireballs until I run out of mana, and then I win. And I just have no problem with it. I am essentially a super powerful character for 5 rounds, and then I suck. This is generally not the pattern that you want your combats to feel like. When you think of a mana bar, you're normally thinking of mana between fights. Like, oh, do I really want to spend that 1 fireball here? And the easiest way to make sure that that happens is to make this a multi-character party. Now, mana bars are pretty limited when you're a 1-character situation, because you can just turn yourself into a glass hammer whenever you need to. But if you have multiple characters in the party, then you can't spam fireballs because it's going to move on to the next character and you're going to get them to do something. Because of that, there's a lot more push to combine your efforts and come up with clever ways to manage things. And everyone has a different mana total, so you're like measuring, maybe I should hold off and balance it out differently, because you essentially have 4 or 5 different mana pools, depending on the size of your party, and they all deplete at different rates, and they all come up at different speeds. That introduces a lot more complexity, and it gives the mana some value. You can also give the mana more value by just driving the price of mana through the roof. If your mana never regenerates, or you have no mana potions or anything like that, or alternately, if you have to generate mana by doing basic attacks at the beginning of the fight and you don't start with any, those are all alternate ways to make the mana system work. But in general, I find mana is best in a multi-avatar situation. So, what's another technique? Another technique for controlling techniques is to simply design the techniques well. So if you've got your wizard and they fire off a fireball, maybe they can fire off an unlimited number of fireballs, but fill in the blank. It takes 15 seconds for the fireball to charge up. The projectile moves super slow. The radius is so large that your fighters are going to get caught in it all the time. You generate heat, and you're going to ignite yourself if you do this too often. Any kind of drawback that you implant into this technique. Now, technically speaking, the mana bar could be considered this kind of design, but it's a very, very common one. There are a lot of other types that you can do, and you can build these into the actual techniques themselves via animation delays and stuff like that. Now, this is what you find most in Street Fighter. You're like, Hadouken, Shoryuken. And every attack doesn't have any mana cost, well, aside from like supers. and instead what they've got is limits on how far they go, how long they leave you open after the fact, and all sorts of other stuff like that. And so yeah, you can throw fireballs all day and night. And in the old games, there are people who did that, and the fireballs were sometimes considered overpowered and annoying. But these days, if you do that, you're going to get your butt kicked by anyone who knows what they're doing, because the fireballs have been balanced to have holes in them. So, the third technique is the art of cooldown. Now, cooling down is something that really rose to prominence with World of Warcraft, and it's continued to be common until today. And the idea is that your attacks, if you don't want your players to spam your attacks, you just say, okay, you can't spam them. You can only use this attack once every 8 seconds. Now, the reason that this is so powerful in a massively multiplayer online RPG is because it's very ping safe. Even if you have a half-second ping, you're okay. Nothing falls down into that quarter-second or half-second gap. You're generally working on the order of seconds, not half-seconds or quarter-seconds, and that makes it very approachable for someone who has a bad computer or a bad connection. But that is not the limit of cooldowns. That's merely why they why people still use them. I find that the best thing about cooldowns is that you can weave them. So maybe you've got yourself, Super Smash every 8 seconds. But that's not what you're going to spend your whole fight doing. Maybe you go like, okay, well, first I gotta go Berserk. And then I gotta do Super Smash, and then I'll do heavy Super Uppercut. And that delay goes over here, and oh no, look at that, they overlap, so I have to decide whether I want to just do Super Smash, Uppercut, Super Smash, Uppercut, Super Smash, or Super Smash, Uppercut, or I could redesign my character a little bit, and I could buy up one of these skills. Maybe I could level up this skill here and shave just a little bit off of that cooldown time. Or maybe I could extend the cooldown time in exchange for making the power stronger. And by allowing the player to design their own approach to every combat, you give them the tool they need to make their character very personalized and also feel very smart. And you get a nice pattern out of it. You're like going into combat, and every combat you're like, ping-a-pong, got it, just perfect. And that's great. I love that thought. But that said, you need to be careful because it's very easy to fall into a rut. See, what I've drawn here is a very, very static technique system. Whether you're fighting a boss or just some random frog, it doesn't matter. You're going to use the same basic techniques. I mean, you might be like, okay, well, I guess I probably don't need to go berserk against a frog, but it's just the same thing anyway. And that's not really very fun. So it might be interesting to think about how you can do this kind of cooldown system without creating a really, really static, entrenched set of powers for each character. There are ways, but they're all very hard to explain in less than 5 minutes, so let's move on to the last way to control your techniques. The last way is to have to build up to them. Now, this is obviously something that has been used before. If you've ever played, not Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. If you've ever played Chrono Cross, you're probably already familiar with the basic concept. Chrono Cross has a system very similar to a mana bar, where you build it up by doing basic attacks. And once you get it to your peak, you can then unleash your super attacks. But it's also got a system where every elemental attack that happens fills in this kind of 3-bar system where if you have 3 of the same elemental attacks in a row, then you have this ultra super elemental affinity going on, and then you can use super powerful elemental attacks, and these things combine pretty well. It's a lot of fun to go through the game being like, okay, well, I've got to build to an attack, and I also want to see if I can build up the alternate elemental system at the same time so that I can unleash a super attack. And there's a lot of things going on when you have to juggle all these prerequisites. So the idea here is that it doesn't have to be that complicated. You might not be able to throw a fireball until after you've thrown a fire dart. So every single time you get into a fight, it's like fire dart, fireball, fire dart, fireball. The ideas here are pretty simple, and I just want to list them for you one last time. So we've got 1, mana. 2, design. Flaws and constraints. 3, cooldown. And 4, prerequisites. My handwriting is shit today. Anyway, that's it. I hope this helps to hone your own sense of what you want your game to be like. I really enjoy seeing a lot of different powers in a lot of different games, and a lot of these new indie designers, a lot of people who aren't stuck in a 50-person group, they come up with some really cool powers. They have these great ideas, but then they forget to do this part. And they're like, okay, well, it's a cool idea, and I'm just going to make it cost 30 mana or whatever. You have to think harder than that. You've got to make those powers part of your game, part of the flow of your combat. And I hope this helps.